Are you tired of undercharging, over-delivering, and overworking? Well, I have some good news for you. I put together a free course for women web designers who want to make more money without overworking. Just go to webdesigneracademy.com/free course or click on the link in the show notes of this episode to get instant access. And since you love podcasts, when you sign up, you'll have the option to get the entire free course instantly in a podcast feed so that you can listen on the go. So if it feels like you've been working 24/7, but not making as much as you want, go get that free course right now at webdesigneracademy.com/free course. Welcome to The Profitable Web Designer, a podcast for web designers who want to work less and make more money. I'm your host, Shannon Mattern, founder of the Web Designer Academy, where we've helped hundreds of web designers stop undercharging, overworking, and create profitable, sustainable web design businesses. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Profitable Web Designer podcast. Today, I am joined by Mike Brevik. He's the host of the BrandRetro podcast and founder of the digital marketing agency Cyberdogz. And Mike has worked with some iconic brands. He's obsessed with marketing and with helping his clients create loyal followings. And I'm super excited to dig into all things marketing and branding and business with him today. So Mike, thank you so much for being here. Can you share a little bit more with our listeners about you and what you do?
Yeah, thank you for having me. And a little bit about me. I'm kind of headquarters out of Minnesota. We work with clients all over the country. And like you mentioned, I'm very passionate about marketing and branding and helping clients succeed and find kind of that niche and that specialty about themselves that we can kind of extract from and build on and kind of take their marketing to the next level. So it's exciting and it's fun, obviously, to see other people win. So
I have so many questions for you about how you find that unique, special thing with your clients. But before we get there, I would love to know a little bit more about your journey and your business journey and like your origin story. So how did you get to, I know it's probably a long story, but how did you get to today where, you're hosting this podcast, you have the agency? What are the early days looking like for you?
Yeah, when I first started out, it's a long time ago, but it was a lot more organic. I had started out my career kind of wanting to be an illustrator and a cartoonist. And that was kind of where I was kind of heading towards. And when I got my first job, I was working for a very small ad agency down in South Texas and was doing a lot of that kind of work. And it didn't take long, maybe 6-9 months somewhere in that time frame where it started to sink in that the criticism and the different, the aspects of the job where I'm like, oh, so I'm not just going to draw pictures all day and they're not just going to love everything I do. And it started to really sink in that this was a job and I had clients to appease. And I kind of shifted at that point thinking, because the whole drawing thing and the artistic part of it was pretty personal to me. So it was like, I don't know if I can kind of take it on the chin here for 20, 30 years like this. Because there's a lot that goes into that. Yeah. And for me, when I pivoted more to focus on graphic design, it wasn't, not that it's not personal to me, but it wasn't as personal as drawing was or the artistic, organic piece was. So at that point, I really shifted into kind of graphic design mode and really started studying on graphic design. And not that I hadn't done that before, but my goal was always to be this cartoonist and this illustrator. That was the goal. And when I kind of made that shift, I just kind of pivoted hard and really started to kind of hone my skills from a graphic design perspective. And I left that agency after a couple of years, and then I worked in printing for 9 years, which was a completely different education. I did, I honed and kind of worked deep into my graphic design skills, but I also learned how to set up the projects correctly, all the file formats. And at that time, it just was a lot more difficult, really, because there wasn't the internet and there wasn't all these different things and these tools and AI and like even the softwares themselves. Like what we see today in Photoshop was a fraction of back then. And so really kind of learning all those mechanics from kind of the ground up, being in the printing industry for 9 years, really just taught me a lot about not only the process, but how to set it up properly and kind of cut my teeth on all the aspects that I didn't know going in. And during that time, websites and different things were starting to pop up and the internet became a thing. And I was self-taught in basically web design at that point, but it was all kind of front end stuff. So Dreamweaver, Adobe PageMill, stuff that was kind of drag and drop because I just didn't have the technical background to be a true developer. But I'd gotten to a point where I was kind of hitting my head on the ceiling as far as my knowledge goes. And I knew things were possible, but I didn't know how they were possible. So I would try to work with developers and some different things on projects. And of course, they would give me whatever answer they gave me. And I don't want to say they were lying to me, but I didn't know any different. So they would tell me what could or could not be done. And I'm like, okay, sounds good. So I kind of knew there was a gap there. And I'm like, okay, so the only way for me to bridge that gap is I got to know at least some of what they know. So at that point, I actually went back to school for programming and kind of learned more of the technical back end piece. So just to kind of recap, I went from Illustrator to graphic design to web design to kind of learning back end programming. And at that point, it was PHP, JavaScript, HTML, all those things. And I hated it. I mean, I did okay. But I had no intentions of being a back end developer. It's just for me to educate myself was really the only goal. But once I completed that, I left the printing world and got kind of brought into the retail world and my corporate kind of journey that lasted about a decade. And I got to utilize all those skills at once within a marketing department. And I got to work with large teams of people and we were building websites and basically digital solutions within e-commerce and leading teams of people and everything from the inception of social media to all kinds of different forms of marketing. We were working with outside agencies and it just kind of all came together, during that time. But luckily, and it sounds like almost like, yeah, that was really genius the way that came together, but there was no genius behind it. It's just the way it happened. And I'm lucky that it happened the way it did. But once I got through all that and was able to kind of let all that marinate and work together within that corporate space, I just got a full range of understanding as to how it all worked, how they all plug into each other, kind of what you need, what gaps kind of typically tend to appear in these types of scenarios. And I just got a really broad understanding, not only from the creative side, but just the marketing and front end side as well. So after a little over a decade in corporate world, retail, I was just ready for a new challenge. And I kind of hit some stumbling blocks in my career to the point where I kind of had to look back in the mirror and kind of think, well, how did I get here in the first place? Like, how did I get off track? Like, how did I get here? And really for me, at that point in my career, I was so far from doing creative things. I was in leadership roles and I wasn't having fun like that anymore. So when I really reflected on it, what I came to understand is, well, creativity and fun and drawing pictures is really what set me out on this course. So after 20 years, how did I get so far off track? And can I get back there? That's the question. So when I left the corporate world or became unemployed or self-employed or however you want to look at it, I started Cyberdogz, and my goal was to just get back to having fun. And I kind of wanted to be creative again, whatever that looked like. I mean, I knew kind of where I was heading and what I wanted to do with it. But when you start with a blank canvas, you really don't know. So I just kind of took the leap and decided that a lot of other people do this. I don't see why I can't. So that was kind of as far as I had gotten in my thought process. And yeah, I mean, that's a very abridged version, but yeah, that journey happened over the course of 20 years and it turned out great, but obviously a lot of pivot points in there as well.
I can relate to so many of the milestones on your journey, and the thread that I was kind of getting from everything that you shared, and you can tell me if this resonates, is that your vision was maybe bigger at the time than what your current situation was. Like, I think of when you're like, okay, I was just doing what the developers were telling me I could do, and I don't know that they were lying to me, but I'm like, maybe there's something more to this. Like, I can relate to just being like, I want to be in control of this. Like, I have a bigger vision. I'm asked, like, I want to collaborate, but I'm also like, okay, but like, also get out of my way. I'm going after this next thing.
Right. Well, this was at the time, but I was always stifled by what the current environment would allow. And
Yes.
like, even when you went out, because I'm a reader too. And like, so I would go out and find books, but like, I'd look at the book and okay, the book was published 2 years ago.
Yeah.
A lot happens in 2 years. So what am I supposed to do with this? So like, that was a huge stumbling block for me. And the only way to at least expedite the process was for me to kind of take some of that upon myself to just, I got to dig in here and figure out how to do this. And if nothing else, to give me at least the tools to push back. Because I mean, it's for anybody who's worked with a very high end developer, they're tough to argue with because I don't know what they know. So it's kind of like you're a little kid again. And it's like, okay, like, I guess I just have to take your word for it. And that's not fun when you're trying to push boundaries and do things.
Yeah, I think stifled is probably like the word I can relate to most. In my corporate career, I was like 15 years in, and I'm like, wait, is this it? Is this what I worked for all of this red tape, this bureaucracy, this monotony, this, I think there's something more out here. And like you said, other people do this, and could I possibly do this? And look at all,
Right.
and then you look back and you're like, look at everything I've learned along the way. And maybe I could take this and make this work. So you decide to leave corporate and go out on your own. How did you get your first clients?
So I'm just going to add one thing in there because you actually just made me think of it when you were saying this. So I grew up in a small town and I'm a classic car guy. And my first car was a 67 Mustang. And I remember like always hearing the old guys talking about, yeah, I had this car and I never should have sold it. And like you hear those conversations like all the time. And as a kid, I just am like, I'm never going to sell my car. I'm never going to I'm not going to be that guy. And I never did. I still own that same car. And when I got into my career, I met all kinds of people in marketing and different aspects that said, I used to be a designer, but then I just quit being creative and now I'm a leader. And I used to draw and paint, but now I don't do that. And that same thing kind of clicked in my head during that time that like, I'm turning into one of those guys. And if I don't do something about it, I'm going to have that regret. And I'm going to basically the talent that I'd procured over the course of a lifetime, I would have just wasted it. And for me, that was kind of the wake up call where I need to think about this and decide if I really want to give up on that. And sorry, I wanted to throw that in there.
No, yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. And it's so much more valuable and can be more valuable to more people when it's kind of like unboxed from the situation that you're in, and you can have such a bigger impact too. So it's like, I don't know. I very much resonate with you're at a crossroads. Do I want to be that guy who wishes he would have done things differently? Or do I want to actually go for this?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So it kind of put me in a situation to kind of call myself out on it, which then I chose to take that leap. But to get those first clients, it was interesting because I had made a small shift at the end of that corporate stint where I went from one large retailer to another. And I was at that second retailer for probably 8, 9, 10 months, somewhere in there. But it was also very validating because when I left my kind of that decade-long experience, when you're in the corporate world, you're only kind of fed the compliments and you're fed the approvals. You're kind of governed in a way like, we're going to throw you kudos and we're going to rise you up the ranks and we're going to reward you when we feel it's appropriate. But beyond that, we're going to keep pushing you. We're going to keep our thumb on your head. We're going to keep doing the things that we need to do so that you don't get too cocky or whatever it is. And I didn't really realize that when I was in the thick of it. But after I left, a lot of the relationships that I was in corporate were very cyclical, which what I mean by that is like once a year, twice a year, whatever the pattern was or the cadence was, that's when I would meet with these certain clients or these big brands like Nike or whatever it was. So when I left, obviously I left in the middle of that cycle. So when those things started to come back around and they would show up and go, oh, where's Mike? Where did he go? And that kind of a thing, I was gone. So when they reached out to me separately and after the fact to say, hey, we heard you left your position. We're really bummed about it. We'd love to stay connected. Or in some cases, they would reach out to me and say, is there any chance we could work with you separately or on the side? And when that started to happen, in the 6, 8, 9 months after I had left, not only was it kind of feeding me opportunities, but it was my confidence was going through the roof because I was like, wait, like I felt like a spoke in the wheel, like big time when I was in that role. And now I'm feeling like, okay, now maybe I'm more capable or maybe I'm more worthy of some of this stuff than I even thought I was. So when I got the opportunity to reconnect and work with these brands as a solopreneur or whatever I was at the time, it was really validating and it really kind of expedited this entrepreneurship inside me. So those were actually my first couple clients. I was working, kind of doing some consulting and some different things on the side for some of these clients that had followed me into this new journey of mine. And they were actually not only working with me directly, but actually making referrals like, hey, we got people that they could use your help. And all of a sudden, I had kind of amassed 6, 7 clients that I was kind of working with on the side, just as just everybody in this industry freelances to some degree. I was freelancing with these guys to the point where I just couldn't keep up. And then that's when I had to make the decision of, okay, do I completely walk away from this career, this corporate life and do this? Or do I give up this? Do I give up the side work? Because at this point, I just can't keep doing both. And that was kind of the major crossroads that pushed me into starting my own business. So I did start my business with, like I said, 6, 7 clients because I already kind of were working with them. But when I made that leap and started, like that first day, it's weird because you don't know what to do with yourself. I'd been getting up and getting ready and driving to work since I was, I don't know, 14 years old, somewhere in there. And to wake up that first day, and I'm a morning person and that kind of thing anyway, but I had nothing to do. I'm just like, well, what should I do right now? Should I go fire up my laptop or would I just hang for a while or what do I hustle at? I don't know what the pattern is. So it was weird. It took me a couple of weeks to really figure it out. And I actually had a guy invited me to a networking thing. And I'm like, I don't even know what do you do? And yeah, he explained it. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like a good, okay, well, I'll go. I have nothing better to do. I'll go. So I started going to networking meetings and I tried to get as much value as I could out of them. But that's kind of how it started. Like, I just didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what entrepreneurship looked like. I didn't know where to, kind of like the thing, I don't know what to do with my hands. It was like that. I just took off on it.
I remember my first day, I had left my day job. I made it so it was January 2nd. So I got all of my benefits from being there for 10 years or whatever. So I had a very specific end date to get my full 401k or whatever that was. And it was January 2nd was my first day of being self-employed. And I went and I got a massage that morning at 9 a.m. And so I'm sitting in rush hour traffic, but I'm I'm on my way to go get a massage today. And then I get to go home and I don't have anything on my calendar. And all of these people are going to work. And this is the best day ever.
Yeah.
And then of course, after that, you're oh, and now there's no paycheck coming in. And now I'm responsible for, I got on my husband's insurance, but now I don't have benefits. And now this is all on me. I personally went into straight hustle mode and I just
Yep.
like ground for a couple years. So how was that?
Yep.
What was that experience like for you? There was like this double-sided coin for me, like the full freedom, but then like a little bit of undercurrent of like fear and terror on the other side.
Yeah. I had went into it with, I had paid off as many bills as I could, and I had financially kind of given myself 90 days. Like if I don't do anything, if I produce nothing, I have 90 days. So if I'm a complete failure, I have 90 days. That was the best I could do. But I knew that wasn't going to happen because it took me a day or two to kind of settle in.
Yeah.
And then I just went crazy for good or bad. So like when I went to like networking meetings and they're explaining to me, you go on these coffee networking things, and I'm like, okay, what are you doing at noon? What are you doing at 1? What are you doing at 1:30? I started just creating busyness. Like I just created chaos and busyness and started filling my calendar with every opportunity possible, but at the same time managing my 6 or 7 clients that I had, because I'm like, well, I can't lose these. I just have to layer these other ones on top. And then, the further I got into it from week 2 to week 3 to week 4, then it started to become more of an infrastructure kind of thing where, now I need scheduling tools to manage my calendar. And then I didn't have any of that stuff thought out when I started. And then I started layering in those pieces as to how to manage my busyness, because I had really made myself very, very busy. Like I was back to working 60, 70 hours a week. It was just within different context. So yeah, inside of, I don't know, 2 to 3 weeks, I'm not even saying I was on the right path, but I had cultivated a very busy path for myself. And then I was just kind of riding that train month over month and really just working it. And to say I had a clue that'd be generous. Like I had no idea.
That was me too. I'm just like, okay, I got all of these clients on the side at my day job who are like, hey, do you do any like vendors that I was working with that had other clients that maybe needed the same thing I was doing? So when I left, I had clients. But yeah, it just felt like what's interesting now is like, I know I was like doing the right things to get clients, but I didn't know that I was doing the right things. Like I'm meeting people, I'm talking to them, I'm curious, I'm building relationships, I'm asking them questions, I'm seeing where I can add value and talk to them, and then letting them know how we can work together. And it just felt so haphazard, but yet that was what it was. So how did that feel for you? Did you come to the realization like, oh yeah, this is part of it. This is what I do.
I'm going to refer back to, I think that confidence that I got from these brands reaching out to me, like even like my connection said Nike, and like them reaching out to me and giving me whatever endorsement, confidence, hey, go get them kind of a vibe that they gave me, just honestly set me up to go out there and believe that even if I don't have the mechanics down, I'm capable of doing this.
Yep.
So I just have to keep swinging. I have to keep going, and I have to keep pushing this thing. And the more I did that, and the more I kind of surrounded myself with other entrepreneurs and like-minded people, it started to become obvious to me where I was ahead and where I was behind.
Yeah.
Like, and that's not a knock on other people. It was just, I could just tell that I'm way ahead of this guy in these areas, but pretty behind in these areas. So like I could kind of start to assess myself in the process and then work on things. And I do believe, this is going to sound arrogant, but like, I think it's impossible to fail at this stuff if you just get after it. Like,
I totally agree.
To truly just like I completely failed, then something catastrophic, you missed it. Because if you're out there pushing and driving and just cultivating relationships, it's almost impossible to fail. And I went into it kind of humble enough I got a business coach day one.
Yeah.
I was surrounding myself with anybody I could that I felt knew more than me. And I'd swallow my pride and I would ask them questions and I would try to learn everything I could from them. And then I just basically tackled all my fears. I'm charismatic enough in a room and like I don't mind talking to people and most people probably would be surprised by what I'm about to say, but I don't like hanging out in large groups of people. I don't like hanging out with strangers. I really don't. But it's part of the gig and I had to get over it and I had to just power through it and I had to suck it up and I had to kind of just own it, you know? And that was probably the hardest part is that there's just a lot of stuff I didn't want to do, but there was nobody else to do it. So it is what it is and you figure it out and yeah, and I just did it anyway. And I did it with the idea of knowing that it wasn't going to be forever. I mean, that was the plan is I can't hunt for every meal forever. Like I got to get to the point where I've got some backstock and I've got some ability to rest and focus on vision because that was the goal of this whole thing.
So, when did you get to the point where you really felt like you had some backstock and you were able to rest and you have the vision? Like, what did that look like for you?
I'd say like year 3.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's always a percentage thing where it's like, I maybe started out with like, I'm going to hustle 99% of the time. And if I get 1% confidence and 1% backstock out of this first year, that's probably good. And then I went from 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20. And little by little, year over year, I just, not in a bad way, but I just really beat myself up and I beat my process up and I tore it down and built it up every year. I calibrated every year because I didn't want to get in this idea that I never wanted to get to the point where I thought I knew what I was doing. And I still don't. Every year I tear it down and I look at what I'm doing and think, is that really, could I do better? Could we switch this? Could we maintain this? Because I think this is a process where things are changing around us way too fast. And if you get too comfortable with kind of your methods and your processes, and again, not that you can't retain a percentage of it, but if you didn't touch it, you're behind. So every year, I just do that. And especially in those initial years, I was even more hard on myself where I just needed to really tear it apart and figure out how I'm going to squeeze a little bit more out of it next year. And and I had, coming into that, I had for those of you who have ever worked retail's tough because there's 12 months in a year. That's what they tell us. But in retail, you've got from January to about August, and then the retail climb and the strategies of August and September get you to October. And then the year's over when October happens because you go from October to Thanksgiving to Black Friday to Cyber Monday to Christmas into New Year's. You don't have 12 months to really kind of live within that environment. You've got roughly, I don't know, 7 to 9 months on a good scenario. And then that last month is a throwaway because that's the thick of the year. That's 60% of your sales in that Q4. So I took that concept in my head and I took that into my business as well, is that first of all, I need to watch for the patterns and see if I can't identify a pattern in my clients and how my business operates. But I also have to know that that pattern exists. And from October to December 31st, I can't count on that because that's going to be a time of the year where it's wasted and that's my regrouping window where I have to get ready for January 1. So I knew that kind of going in and I adopted that into my own business so I could get ahead of the competition in the meantime. Because not every agency, but a lot of the agencies that I had worked with and had experience with, none of them were doing that. None of them were taking those opportunities. So for right or wrong, I mean, could have been wrong at the time. I wouldn't have known the difference. But for right or wrong, that's just how I did it because I was bringing that retail and that corporate baggage with me.
So, yeah, I mean, that makes total sense. This is what I see like with a lot of our students and our listeners is that they're like, oh, everybody's off during the summer. Nobody's really doing anything. I'm going to take that time off too. And then they want to like get back at it in right now. And then they're like, oh crap, where are all the clients? And I'm like, they're already done for, for, I don't think you can ever stop marketing. I just don't think you ever stop. And that's what I'm like, if you want something in 3 months, you need to be doing something today about that. And so that's kind of where I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
This is going to sound really aggressive, but my thoughts are just like you said. If you think your competition or your clients, if you think that they're taking a nap for 90 days, then you should be kicking it in the ass during that 90 days. So you're 90 days ahead of them.
Yes.
Like that's, especially if it's true, even if you mapped out your kind of your business peaks and valleys, and if you have a chunk in your kind of your grid that shows where this is where my opportunity is when the clients aren't paying attention, you should be grinding the hardest you grind all year during that time, so that when they engage again, you're so far ahead of them that you can just scoop up the opportunities and really be where you need to be. Like, don't sleep when they sleep. Like,
we are so on the same page for that. I want to switch gears and, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
No,
I was just going to say, that's like, I mean, you hear that a lot. You hear a lot of people have that mentality, and it's like, I get how you got there, and I get why that's probably the advice you give other people, but you got to ignore people sometimes. You have to think for yourself, and you have to think strategically.
Agreed. Hey, web designers, I've got 1 minute to tell you about Wix Studio, the web platform for agencies and enterprises. So here are a few things you can do from start to finish in 1 minute or less on Studio. Adapt your designs for every device with responsive AI. Reuse assets like templates, widgets, sections, and design libraries across sites and share them with your team. Switch up the styling of hundreds of web pages. That means fonts, layouts, and colors all in a click. Add no-code animations and gradient backgrounds right in the editor. Export your designs from Figma to Wix Studio in just a click. Oh, and one more big one. Package and deliver everything your client needs in one smooth handover. Time's up, but the list keeps going. Step into Wix Studio and see for yourself. Head on over to wix.com/studio to start creating. So I want to switch gears and talk more about like your approach to marketing and branding. And I know you're super obsessed with it, passionate about helping your clients develop a loyal following, just looking at what you do with BrandRetro and Cyberdogz. So a new client comes to you. What is your approach to leading them through this process of building their brand and really becoming that brand?
Yeah. Depending on whether if there's somebody that's coming to me and they have no brand yet, like we're starting at complete zero, versus somebody who's coming to me with a pre-existing brand, either way, I've got to dig into it and I've got to figure out kind of what this initiative is about. So you're building this business. What's your vision? What's your goal? And I have to extract as much of the human kind of description of it as I possibly can, because that's the juiciest part of what I can then build a brand off of. Because a lot of times you're going to get those canned answers of, well, we provide the best service in this area. And it's like, that means nothing to me. Why did you start your business? And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the truth behind it when they say, I wanted to spend more time with my family. Perfect. So family is important to you. Now, and then I could start to kind of unpack what this brand is really about and the pieces behind it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to build a logo or a brand around, a bunch of people holding hands or anything. But those ingredients that go into that brand, if I know all those things and we can extract the things that matter most to the person behind the brand, we can build a very authentic, accurate brand, but we're going to build a brand that you're going to be very proud of and very confident to sell. Because I think that's a huge part of branding that gets missed sometimes is people build brands that it's just a logo, who cares, right? So that's the mindset they go into it with. So then when they're out there selling it, there's a disconnect in what they're trying to sell versus the brand or the company that's behind them, because they're not bought into it in the same way. Where with people like you and me that have built their own brands from scratch and they've had to take that leap of faith and maybe even make a ton of sacrifices along the way, it's a lot more personal to us. So for me to defend or sell or even tell people about my brand, the experience is a lot different because I'm very passionate about it. Everybody needs to have that to some degree, because that's what branding is. It's an experience. And so when they come to me, that's the first step. It's discovery. It's for me to try to get inside their head and try to extract those ingredients that I can play off of.
You said something that made me think of the biggest mindset shifts I help branding and web designers make around like their pricing, because they think, and a lot of times it's coming from corporate, that they think that the actual like deliverable of the logo or the style guide or whatever, even the process of like asking these questions is like what they're selling to their client. And when you said it's about their confidence in going forward after we have fully fleshed this out and delivered this, what's your philosophy on pricing and of the work that you do and like the value of a brand and that piece? Because this is just a piece that like when it clicks for people, it clicks. Like you're not selling a logo, you're not selling colors and fonts and all of the pieces and getting, so yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think to any young designers out there, just from a process standpoint, you got to work yourself up to, you know what I mean? Like put a baseball analogy in place, like hit some first base runs, then get some second bases, then get some home runs, then graduate to grand slams. Like let your pricing kind of grow with you as you start to collect some of these accolades, and your confidence will match it too, because once you know you can deliver, you know, you're not wishing it anymore. Like I know I can hit a home run pretty much anytime I want. Then you know you can price appropriately for it as well. But back to that discovery phase, to just design logos is very utilitarian and it carries no value, because you're exercising this process of I can do artwork that looks like this. But when you dig into that discovery phase and you can extract the pieces behind why the logo is what it is and the intricacies as to why it becomes an emotional connection to that client, you don't even have to talk money. The value just comes with it. So if they love that logo and they have a personal connection to it, whatever number you're asking, just for fun, call it $5,000, that number doesn't scare them anymore because they love it that much. They're not scared of it because it's a inherent part of not only where they're at currently, but it's a representation of who they are and what their brand is. But it's now a springboard to the future because they can use it as such. If they just pick a logo because they got tired of looking at them and, well, I guess I can live with that one, there's no emotional connection. So when you come back and say, okay, now you owe me $5,000 for it, that seems like a lot because you're not passionate about it. There's no connection there. And you have to have, I mean, even that process needs to be an experience for the client, because they might not have to fully understand what you're doing, or they might not, like, I don't know what you're doing with all this information, but it should kind of become prevalent to them when you unveil those logo options and they can start to see there should be lights flashing in their eyes to go, okay, I see what you're doing here. I see how we're getting there. And if they're feeling that and they feel that experience, what you ask, what your price is for that logo becomes very secondary. Like it sounds crazy, but this is actually true. I don't worry about the numbers at all. Like I track the numbers and I manage them so that I'm straight for my bookkeeper. But as far as chasing numbers or chasing prices, I don't do that at all. I chase experience. I seek customer happiness, and I worry about all of that 80% of the time. And the 20% that's left over, it just figures itself out.
I love
It
that.
really does.
I love
It
that
sounds
so
crazy,
much.
but it really does.
No, it makes total sense to me. And it's like when you can really connect with someone and ask the right questions to show them, like, I understand what you want more than you're even able to articulate it when you tell me, oh, I just want to be the best widget maker for this audience and whatever. And you get underneath the core of like why they want that, what it's going to do for their life, what it's going to do for their business, what it's going to do for their family, all of these pieces. And you pull together something that they're so excited about. Like you said, it's a springboard to the future for them, and they feel unstoppable, and they're going to go forward from there and create the thing that they told you they wanted, and you like empowered that for them. That is so much different than like, oh, I can design you a logo and you get 3 revisions and here's how much it costs. Like you said, that will absolutely, that takes care of itself. That results in referrals, that results in amazing case studies and success stories. And it's fun for us as the like designer to be in relationships with clients at that level, I think.
Yeah. And I think it also allows you to know what a true home run looks like.
Yeah.
Because I think and I've been in the mode too, but when you're just in logo design mode, you don't know what a home run looks like because you're just hoping they pick one.
Right.
You're just like, I don't know. I just want them to like one. But when you go through that process and you know, probably like you said, I know more about what this should look like than they do.
Yeah.
You know what a home run looks like. And it's easier to sell. It's easier to get behind. It's a superpower and you have to tap into that.
How do you tap into that for yourself?
I actually don't know. Like,
I love it. Yeah.
This is just how I've always done it because I don't know. I mean, logos for me, like, I'm not critical of like bad logos. If they mean something to somebody or if they have some legacy to them, and it might not be my artistic choice, but to me, the backstory is what matters most.
Yeah.
So when I get the opportunity to craft it from the beginning or to really tear it down and build it back up, I just don't want to leave any stone unturned because I want them to love it. Like, I think the saddest thing is when a business is 5 or 10 years old and they've finally got maybe enough confidence or even enough money to go, yeah, I always hated our logo. It's time to rebrand. I get it, but that's a bummer, man, to be 5 or 10 years into your process and to have to start over from a brand perspective. Not that if it's a bad brand or maybe you're not giving up that much, but I just think that that's a momentum killer for your business. So to get them off on the right foot and to really give them that tool up front, and maybe they'll never have to do that if done right. But I just think we owe it to them to do that and to guide them through that process and to help them understand how important that is. Because I think a lot of entrepreneurs and business startups, business owners, I think they really backburner the importance of brand because they don't feel like it matters as much. And to me, I mean, I'm biased, but it's like, it's the cheapest date in town. It's the most important aspect of your business. Like, you don't have to spend the moon on it, but make it a priority.
You said something that made me think about like the very beginning of our conversation where you're like, I just want to knock it out of the park for them. And, it's like back to the early days of like illustration where it was fun for you until it wasn't. And you're able to now really create something for a client that they are absolutely in love with. And that's just got to feel very fulfilling to have kind of come full circle on being able to create art that people really loves and that has a huge impact for them.
Yeah, it does. And just to be clear too, like I'm selfish in the process because I want to love it too.
Yeah.
So like there are plenty times where it's like, I might even love it more than the client does. I mean, I don't necessarily tell them that, but it's just, like I said, I like hitting home runs and I like doing projects like that. And if they love it as much as I do, then win-win. But sometimes it's a delayed response too. Like I've had many a client where they're like, yeah, I mean, I like it, but if you say it's great, let's go for it, and they kind of put it in my hands and I'll make that decision. But slowly over time, as their business grows or they start to collect compliments, or then it starts to click for them maybe 6, 7, 8 months down the road. But either way, it is fun because that like they're going to dine off that victory for a long time.
Yeah.
And they might not even know to what extent yet because their business has to build around it. But you kind of know when you know it, and it's fun to set them up for that.
So good. So tell me about the BrandRetro podcast. Why did you start it?
I basically got pressured into it. Like I'd had enough conversations like this where people are, like, you need to get a podcast and you need to do this. And I was kind of like, well, why? Like, what would I do with it? I don't even know what I would say. And it was one of those things where I almost got challenged and pressured into it. And I took it as okay, well, they're challenging me to do it. I'll do it. And I started down this road of, well, how do I want to be different? And how do I want to deliver value in this? And there's a lot of marketing podcasts out there. And I felt like, not a knock on any of these other guys, I just didn't feel like I could be like them, in the sense that I didn't want to be like a Groden or a Gary Vee, or I didn't want to just churn percentages and guidance kind of like I was just talking to empty space. I wanted to be very transparent and very authentic about it. And I wanted to tell stories and hear other people's journeys and kind of the things that they had been through. So the idea was a couple things. One is that I wanted to talk with entrepreneurs and have conversations around creativity and entrepreneurship, and kind of that as an overall theme. But I also wanted to always bring it back to the road of what I call like the brand retro mindset, in that where we're tapping into this place where brand and kind of the nuances of mean something to us. Because I think we forget that sometimes as entrepreneurs. I think even if you love your brand from the beginning, year one, you're going to become a tax expert. In year two, now you're wearing the HR hat. And by year three, now I'm a sales guy. And by the time you hit year 4 or 5, the fatigue starts to set in. And now you're just a business owner. And it's like, some people persevere through that and some people give up and they're like, this sucks. This is way harder than I thought it was going to be. I don't want to do it anymore. And you start to fall out of love with your brand. So for me, the brand retro mindset is you got to continually, it's kind of like marriage. You got to have those date nights. Well, you got to have date nights with your brand and remember why you fell in love with it in the first place, because that is going to energize you and that's going to give you the juice and the kind of the gas in your tank to go forward. Like I always throw the example out there to people because it seems to be the one that clicks to them. But can you remember like the best Christmas you ever had? Like what was your best Christmas ever in your whole life? And for most people, it's when they were a kid. It's like, for me, it was when I got my Castle Grayskull. And for other people, it might have been the Barbie Easy Bake Oven thing. I don't know. But you've never had a Christmas like that since. And wouldn't you just tap into that feeling every day if you could?
Yeah.
And I feel that way about your brand. If you can excite yourself with your own brand on a daily basis, and that comes out of you, as you're growing your business, I definitely believe it's going to have a positive impact on your business and you're going to sell different. You're just going to present differently. So to me, that's the goal with this podcast, is I want to get people fired up, not only about entrepreneurship and what that experience looks like, but I want to be transparent about it, because it's not a pleasure cruise. You're going to have challenges and you're not alone. Like, being an entrepreneur is a lonely place to be, but it doesn't have to be, because we all go through it and we're all at different stages in the process and we all kind of tackle things differently. So
I love that origin story that you were just challenged to do it, but then you're like, oh, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this my way. And we're going to bring like joy to that because, yeah, one of the things that I have seen on my journey is that people will just kind of like throw an old brand away and start over. And like you said, there's an opportunity cost to doing that. And if you don't need to do it, if you're just jaded, if you're just burnout, if you're just bored, and if you can kind of like get back into the place of like, oh, this is why I do this, not because I love to do my bookkeeping or, you
Yeah.
know, process payroll or whatever it is, but it's because of how I felt when I started this. I love that concept for that podcast and kind of tapping back into like, what were all the possibilities and just even loving the grind. I mean, like, there was a
Yeah.
time where it was just like, oh, the grind didn't feel like a grind. The grind felt exciting. Like, and yeah.
Just how the grind translates to other industries. Like that's why, like, even if you look at like the guests we've had on our podcast, I've interviewed everybody from DC and Marvel comic book artists to like high-end business owners
Yeah.
because the grind, the struggle, the challenge, the pain points, pretty similar across the board, honestly. But they're industries that are so different, that have different stories, different journeys, but we all go through it on some level. And to be fair, like, I don't know if I'm hit or miss sometimes. Like, I just know that I want to do the podcast in that way, and I'll slowly tighten it up and refine it over time because I just wanted to do something unique. And again, selfishly, I want to have fun doing it because if I hate doing it, I'm not going to do it. So,
Mike, it has been so fun talking to you. I'm the same way. I'm like, this podcast is a very selfish endeavor for me. It is so fun to get to talk to people like you and ask you all of the questions and meet new people and make new friends. So I really appreciate your time today. I appreciate you being here. Can you share with everyone where they can go to learn more about you and BrandRetro and Cyberdogz?
yeah, you can check us out at cyberdogsmarketing.com, and that's CYBERDOGZ marketing.com. And actually, all our social links and everything are right on there, so you can follow along. And then BrandRetro with Cyberdogz is my podcast, and the website for that is brandretro.com.
Well, thank you so much. I'll link up all of that in the show notes. Everyone, go check that out. And yeah, thanks so much.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.